It's a full room here, so we will knock this out. So we are the AbleGamers Charity. This is us. I am Craig Kaufman.
I'm Steve Spawn.
And I'm the program director for the charity.
And I'm the COO.
So we can talk about video games. So what AbleGamers is we are a charity that supports gamers with disabilities. So what we do is we work within the game industry, giving feedback to game developers and giving out controllers to people that need assistive tech. So we will get into that. We've got slides here.
So back a decade ago, AbleGamers started as a EverQuest blog when a man named Mark Barley, seen on screen here, actually used the game to keep in contact with his friend on an army base in order to keep that social connection going. When tragedy struck and Stephanie had an attack by multiple sclerosis, she was no longer able to use the mouse. And when she couldn't use the mouse, her ability to play the game and thus connect with the world was severed. When that happened at the time, there was no more information online on how you could conquer or get around a disability. And that was when Mark decided that this was a problem that was not only something that he had to personally tackle, but something that every disabled gamer might go through at some point in their lives, or even just a gamer in general may have a problem at some point. So AbleGamers was born as a way to answer the call to help people who can no longer game the way that they always thought they should, and then move on to being able to game the way that you can with technology. That was actually how we came up with Craig. When Craig joined, he joined from a similar standpoint as did I, where you could always game a certain way until one day it changes.
So as Steve was talking about, things will change and you may need to game a different way. For about 8 months, I couldn't use my right arm, which made gaming a little bit more difficult. And that's why we give out grants.
Right. Our grant program was actually designed to help the disability community because many are on set incomes that the $300 item is a very difficult purchase. Our average grant cost is around $350, and what we mean by that is that if you need a specialized controller, if you need a controller that has rearranged buttons or has a different configuration for your computer, we'll actually help purchase that item in order to help get over that physical barrier. Unfortunately, some grants can be upwards of $2,000 to $3,000, depending on the complexity of the case. Most grants are specialized, but thanks to the increased awareness and cooperation of the hardware makers that we work with, assistive technology like the Elite controller that Xbox is doing right now can be purchased at places like Amazon and Best Buy.
And then we give out about 250 to 500 grants a year. It depends on the funding levels. Some years, we have a lot of companies that get on board, and we've had a lot of growth, and we've been able to get more people gaming every year, which is awesome. And we send our grants out all over the world, which is really cool. We're not just a charity that operates in America. We make sure that everyone can game all across the world.
Yeah, one of the things about the grants that we found along the way was that when you're giving out a grant, you're giving it to one individual. And that was what happened to me originally back in January of this year. We gave out a grant to a young kid, 16 years old, has a type of muscular dystrophy. He can't play any games unless it's by a controller with his mouth. Well, we got him gaming again, and he was happy and thrilled, but the whole time that we were doing the grant, other people from the facility were walking around looking at us kind of sad because they weren't able to participate. And that's when the expansion pack idea came up, where we would give these entire grant packages to facilities so that we could include more than one person in the grant. And that was, 11 months ago? We've done quite a few since. The first one was in Pittsburgh, and the second one actually was here in Columbus.
Yeah, we were approached by the Franklin County Board of Developmental Disabilities about someone who was in the facility that needed a gaming setup. They would play NES games, and the situation was getting frustrating because NESs are getting old and they didn't work. So we were able to get the facility a Wii U with all the controllers, so it would play just like the original NES, and we set it up, which was really cool because the Franklin County Board of Developmental Disabilities didn't know that I live in Columbus, so they called us, and I was like, I live 20 minutes up the road. I can head over there, which is really cool. And then, so that's a picture above my head is part of that. He was able to play Mario for the first time in like 6 months, and as soon as he heard the music, he came running down the hallway because everyone likes Mario.
The sad fact of it is, at least 1 in every 5 of us have a physical disability, and that number actually goes up if you include invisible disabilities, mental disabilities, audio and visual disabilities. As many as 2 to 3 of every 5 people can have some kind of disability, but the severest of those disabilities is 1 in 5. And that was when we started coming up with numbers to sort of broaden the exposure of playing with a disability is not a rare case, as you might think. We have a lot of people who come to us who need help because they broke their arm, or because their child fell off their bed, or what have you. It's just a random accident of life. Studies say up to 80% of us will be temporarily disabled at some point during our lives.
And that's why AbleGamers made a document where we called it Includification, and it is a 47-page guide that talks about accessibility features for games. Steve actually wrote, so I can let him talk about it.
Well, it's a fancy buzzword for a very simple idea. We had developers coming to us and saying, all right, look guys, you sold us on the idea of making games accessible. Now, why don't you shut up about it and show us how to do it? So we said, all right, fine. And we made this guide. We reached out to EA, Rockstar, Harmonix, all of the top publishers, and we asked for time with their engineers and their developers, and we came up with this guide with their help on what are the best practices, what are the easiest solutions you can use, and what are the most user-friendly for developer ways that you can include this practical set of game accessibility guidelines.
And it's been cool. So we can break it down with some more of that here. I could start out. So, there's a lot of information that goes in through this guide. It's 47 pages, so we don't have to give all of the information out during this panel, but you can check it out at accessible.games, because they released .games URLs, so we were very excited to snag it. But yeah, you could check it out at accessible.games. But we can go through some of it really quickly. So visual impairments, and one of the things that Steve made sure to do when he was writing it is break it down. Not every studio can do every single thing to make every game accessible. There's time constraints, there's budget, there's people constraints, and so even just adding hitting level 1 increases the player base and the people that can play your game. So level 1 is just simply changing text color, changeable font sizes, and adding colorblind options. Like those are huge, and then it goes all the way up to level 3, which is text to speech. It varies between the studios what you're able to accomplish, but just doing the first levels help it out a lot.
Yeah, essentially why we came up with 3 different levels. We came up with an idea of good, better, best. So if you can accomplish level 1, which we consider a good accessibility, then you're talking about 60% of the player base that is in the disability community can now play your games, just by knocking out those simple things. And level 1 early in the development cycle is ridiculously easy to implement. We're talking maybe a day or 2 tops of development time in order to implement almost all level 1 changes.
And especially if you plan ahead, and that's why we come to gaming expos and we call into studios, because changing all of the art to make it colorblind friendly may not be a quick fix, but if you think about it while you're developing, it makes a huge difference, as noted. So if you could see here, this is Candy Crush, and on your left side, there we go, you can see it in the colors. And then on the right side is what somebody who may be red-green colorblind would see. As you can see, it's actually really difficult to tell what colors are what. And that's why it's important to have different shapes representing as well.
Yeah, we use this screenshot only purely for dramatic effect. One of the things that Candy Crush did correctly is they have all kinds of different shapes. So if someone was red-green colorblind, they would be fine because they'd be able to see what the shapes are and what they represent. So whenever we're talking about colorblind options, if a company doesn't want to spend the money to rehue all their graphics, you can simply put markers above things and then allow people to tell by those changed markers on the screen.
So here are some facts. So 99% of people who are colorblind are not totally colorblind. They're color deficient. There are different levels of colors that people can see, and that's why it's important to include these features. It's not just black and white. There's many different color deficiencies. And one in seven people have color deficiencies.
Yeah, 8% of all men are colorblind completely. Up to 16% have some sort of color deficiency, but only 0.5% of all women everywhere have complete and total color blindness. It's actually relatively rare in the scheme of things to be colorblind, even though it's the word that has filtered into our vocabulary. It's actually deficiency because you can be color deficient and not even realize it. For example, if you've ever gone into a paint store and you've ever, go down to Lowe's and you say, why are there 17 different colors of green on the wall? Well, you might not be able to tell that they're all different. They're actually just one shade off from each other, but your brain may not be able to see that due to the way your eyes developed.
And red-green is the most common. So those are colors to watch out for when making games.
The mobility sort of hit home for me because that obviously is my wheelhouse and what I care about for myself. Mobility is actually the largest area that we deal with at AbleGamers because the majority of people who come to us for help are people who have some sort of disability that stops them from moving their arms as everyone is used to using them. We developed our levels here a little bit generously. Level 1 is simply allowing yourself to have remappable controls and remappable keys. I mean, no gamer wants to play the way the developers want them to play. We all want to move our keys the way we want. So it's incredibly important. That's why it's on the console now. But then having things like third-party access, movable UIs, the ability to use macros and difficulty settings, fail-safes, all of those things are enhancements to gameplay that somebody might not see as an accessibility feature, but to somebody out there, if they can't move their camera fast enough, they can't play the game. So it's important to add these things that are quality of life as well as accessibility features. Again, most of these relatively easy to add. Obviously, if your game doesn't use a mouse, that's not so easy. But everything else, pretty easy to add.
And then, so for hearing impairments, so someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, focusing on closed captioning and on-screen visuals is super important for people to be able to play the game. So one of the biggest examples that I know of recently is Overwatch came out, did a lot of cool things, a lot of things right, but when you use your ultimate, the characters yell something. There's no visual on-screen thing, so we have a lot of deaf friends that play with us, and we have to type in the chat, watch out, ultimate is coming, because you can't hear if it's high noon or anything like that. So it's super important for developers to have closed captioning options or subtitles in their game, as well as on-screen visuals for when important things are happening.
Right, that's why Microsoft actually coined the phrase the baby test. So what Microsoft discovered is, again, not only is this accessible sense and golden standards, but it's actually quality of life. Because if you are a new parent, you have a new baby in the house, and you really want to go to Halo and blow some people up, they wanted you to be able to be immersed in the story without disturbing the baby, waking it up, and ruining your night of gaming. So what they came up with was the baby test, so that if you can play a game and you won't quote unquote wake the baby, then you should be able to enjoy the game without having any kind of interference. And that sort of goes back to our first points about levels. It's just a good option to allow people to enjoy your game the way they want to.
And this is just another example of just showing, explaining where the footsteps are coming from or what is happening. Just being able to visually see what is going on in the story so you don't miss part of the developer's vision due to not being able to know the story. So then we've got, so learning impairments, having tutorials. I know a lot of gamers like to skip tutorials, but featuring them are very important. Making them skippable is good because sometimes you've played, the first and second and third games that came out before it, so you kind of understand it, but those are super important for a lot of people. As well as sandbox modes. Being able to just mess around within the game mechanics and get used to it without having to complete a task is also important. Same with difficulty levels, just being able to play it on easy, so maybe it's not as frustrating to try to figure out where you're going through the puzzle, or maybe you could take a few more bullets so that way you get used to the levels and how the game plays.
Right, if you're developing a AAA game, it's great to have a reactionary system so that if your user is having a problem with an area, it'll automatically get easier or the player gets stronger. That's not always something an indie can do. But what you can do is you can make it where the game automatically detects if a player has died X amount of times so that they become invulnerable if that's what they want. These are options that you can add so that the average gamer won't necessarily notice they're there until it's something that you need.
And Nintendo's done that actually really well with the most recent Super Mario games they've done, as well as the Yoshi, where if you fall off the cliff like 10 times, it will go, do you want to play as Super Mario where you have a cape and you're invincible? So it still gives a gamer the option to be like, no, I'm going to beat this level no matter how many times I die, or it lets you skip through it, which is awesome. It's not noted as an accessibility feature, it's just a good game design feature. So yeah, this is us. You can follow us on Twitter, we're on Twitch, we're on Facebook, basically anywhere you can follow a social media, we have it. There's still a MySpace. Steve hasn't updated it in a while, but we have a GeoCities. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, please let us know. I know we didn't go too much into everything specific because everyone always has a lot of questions on different things, so we wanted to give as much time. So if anyone has any questions, you should do it. There we go. What's up?
Especially when it comes to VR, yeah. VR was not safety tested at all. It was something that just sort of came up as an afterthought to a lot of companies. And when they come to us, they ask about things like that. The best thing that we can tell people is to adjust the over-the-shoulder camera. If somebody has a point of reference, just like in a moving car, if you can look at a stationary object, your motion sickness might go away. But if you're over the shoulder with the camera and you can't see yourself, then you can end up puking all over your VR helmet, and that's gross. So definitely not what we recommend.
And then there's also other features too. So there's a game called Nuclear Throne, and they are one of the things they're famous for is the screen shake, just how intense the screen shakes. But we were able to talk to them, and they put a slider, so you can turn it down where the screen doesn't shake. So if you want to make it intense and where it's hectic and the screen shakes, that's great. That is what you want to do in your game. That is perfect. But being able to have a slider to adjust it allows people to do a level that is comfortable for them. Any other questions? We've got to fill some time. We can talk. Let's do this.
right, well, time to break out the Cards Against Humanities.
Yeah, done. Oh, I shut it off. Sorry.
Oh,
All right,
now
it's
you broke
over.
it.
Oh, I ruined it.
Well, since you broke it, I guess we're done here.
But it's been cool. The game industry as a whole has been a lot more responsive to the needs of people with disabilities, and the conversation has switched from, Steve and I have been talking about this. The conversation has switched from us trying to explain that there are people with disabilities that want to play games to the industry jumping in and getting involved and reaching out to us daily, asking how they can make games more accessible and how they can be more inclusive.
Yeah, and the thing about disability and accessibility is it's a personal choice right now. But as the government is now getting involved with CVAA and these overreaching regulations where accessibility is going to be mandatory and not optional, you're going to find more and more accessibility options being added to games. I mean, today's a great example. We've gone into places and we've given a talk to 500 people. We've gotten into places and had a small crowd. It really depends on the area and who's interested in accessibility. But usually those people are the ones who have had disability at least touch their lives in some way. And there's times where people haven't. And then again, there's times where people don't even think about it. One of the stories Craig and I love to pass back and forth is when we were helping StarCraft over at Blizzard. Literally talking to one of the developers saying, "Oh yeah, man, these accessibility options you had were great, but have you considered this?" And then one of us mentioned about, well, it's hard to read the mini map because it's red and green, and the guy just stops and he goes, "I'm responsible for that part of the UI, and the weird part is I'm actually red-green colorblind." And I'm like, "Oh, come on, dude, like seriously." And it's just one of those things because he deals with it every day. He doesn't think about it as a disability. He's just used to dealing. And it took that moment to be like, you know what? You should probably put in a small option here, buddy.
And Blizzard's been adding colorblind stuff, so it's just cool.
Yeah.
Overall, it's been fun to watch the industry adapt and include, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh. Would you like to tackle Dark Souls?
You're the darkest among us. So
Okay, fair enough. So Dark Souls is interesting. It's the developer's vision to make that game hard. Putting it a super easy mode changes the art and design of the game, but there are features that Dark Souls includes. So it actually has some really nice audio cues in it. So I know the game is very dark, but being able to have nice audio in it helps out a lot. And it's one of the best example we use is Octodad. Octodad, if you've ever played it, is a incredibly wiggly, goofy game. And if we were to tell the developer that, hey, this needs to be accessible, it needs to be easy to control, that ruins the game for what the game is supposed to be. But Young Horses made sure to include closed captioning and colorblind features. So while the game may not be playable for everyone, it's playable by more people just because they added extra features. So there is always options. Dark Souls is incredibly hard, but it's supposed to be, which is why I'm terrible at it. But at the end of the day, is being able to include more features is what's important.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we always like to put out there, especially to audiences and on recorded video like this, is we do not want to harm the content that's being created. So if you have a vision for your game and part of your game's vision is that this one area is ridiculously hard and you have to walk across the tightrope above a bridge that's on fire and that's inaccessible, then we're not going to tell you to change that part. That's up to you. That's your vision. Then great. Add in the accessibility that you can. Make it as accessible as you can to as many people as you can, and then call it a day. Just be happy with it at that point. And we're never going to advocate a change that would harm the original idea behind the game.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. We have a booth where literally at the other end of the hallway from here, Steve and I are always around, so you could always just either shoot us an email, find us around here, and just ask us questions if you have any. So
You just live here now?
I do.
Oh, cool.
I will live here from now on. So
Nice.
if you need me, I'll be right there. So cool. Thank you guys.